How's it, everybody? Hope you're all doing well on this chilly evening, starting into our winter. I've been away, was in KZN just before the floods hit, and I really take my heart goes out to so many people out there. I really hope you get water and supplies soon. But this evening, dealing with other pertinent matters, is the dear Ashwell Gleason. Evening, Ashwell.
Thank you for joining us. Ruth? Thanks very much.
So Ashwell is the South African wildlife crime expert and registrar for the sub-Saharan region, right? You deal with basically on the ground training. You have the South African Wildlife, the South African Wildlife College that you head?
All right. Yes, I'm the registrar at the Southern African Wildlife College. Yeah.
Amazing. And how many students do you currently have at the moment?
It varies. We've got a whole lot of, funny enough, field ranger students, which essentially had to do wildlife law enforcement training. So it's like quite a compressed training program of about 7 to 8 weeks. And then we've got 50 students on year certificates focused in conservation, but they also have an element of wildlife law enforcement in it. And then over and above that, we have what we call like a conservation canine training facility with over 50 dogs. It's one of the biggest of its type, canine facilities where dogs are trained to track and apprehend poachers and other kinds of wildlife crimes. So the dogs can detect ivory, rhino horn, explosives, firearms, and narcotics. So lots of cross training. It's one of our big passion areas. It's a big thing that's shifting into Africa and even globally. The use of canines in law enforcement is coming back really in a really big way. And then we have an air wing as well. So we have 2 planes that are used in poacher detection work in the Greater Kruger area where I'm based. And then we also train conservation pilots that fly light aircraft, fixed wing aircraft for detecting or suppressing poachers, or sadly detecting carcasses from the air. And we also use other friends to help us, which are vultures. If you see hundreds of vultures circling around somewhere, there's probably a big carcass or something there. And we do a lot of research work as well. And we obviously, although we're an NGO, we're actively involved with the South African state. And I know people probably raise their eyebrows, but the Department of Forestry, Fisheries and Environmental Affairs, we try and support them because there's an expression, I'm not going to use the full word, it's better to be inside the tent than being outside the tent trying to kind of influence things. So we do support a lot of state initiatives. We train a lot of conservation officials from the state, private sector, other NGOs, and of course we're very active into the rest of Africa, which is kind of what I wanted to bring in as well as for the viewers is to talk with a nice kind of helicopter view, as I call it, or an eagle eye view, that we can actually engage in what's happening in South Africa and what also is happening outside of South Africa around conservation.
Okay, brilliant. I don't know. TG's just trying to tell me something quickly.
Sure, no problem.
Second. No. I think there's just an issue with tech. Quickly, what's the story? Sorry about this. What's the weather out there in the Kruger tonight?
Actually, we've had since Saturday rain. The weather fronts have kind of slipped in via KZN and also I think up your way. So we've had a very strange late period of rain. By now the rain should have stopped. So lots of action in terms of animal movement. So we've had lions. I live in a fenced area within the park, and we've had a lot of activity in the evenings. Even before we started, probably about 45 minutes ago, we heard the lions roaring and contact calls. So yeah, very, very lucky, very, very fortunate the way I'm.
So everything's looking green. You mentioned, I've got some pictures about the lions. We're going to focus on lions because I think not enough. Everyone thinks, oh, the lions are, the king of the jungle. They're doing great. Everyone's always worried about the rhinos. Obviously, it is a huge concern. But I don't think people realize the impact of what's going on with our lions. By the way, if anyone who wants to ask Ashwell a comment, just highlight at Rebellious Ruth, and I will ask Ashwell a comment. So yes, let's talk about your lions. Let's talk about their daily lives in terms of what they go through and how they are sort of exploited to this terrible markets in the East.
Yeah, it's unfortunately the challenge with the lions right now. It's been traditionally two things. One, when lions encounter livestock, farmers and those kind of things, obviously they would get shot or be dealt with, and that, in a strange but horrible way, you kind of get used to. If you some of the viewers might have remembered that there was a male lion that kept on escaping out of the Karoo National Park in the last few years, and they kept on having to go and find him, catch him, and bring him back. And unfortunately, in the end, that lion had to be put down. He was a Houdini. He kept on escaping, and eventually got to a point where he was obviously surviving on sheep and goats in that region, in the Karoo, and it was becoming problematic. So that's understandable. There's a human-wildlife conflict, and you've got to manage that. And what I think a lot of people, when it comes to lions, particularly, you really need large areas for wild lions to have enough game, their prey base, that they can hunt successfully and sustain themselves. Where it becomes problematic is outside of that space. What we're seeing is, obviously, there's been an increase of lion poaching for the traditional Chinese medicinal market, what we call TCM in insider speak, like for us that are involved in trying to deal with the challenge, and also at the same time, obviously, trying to look at solutions. So since 2006, pretty much the lion populations have definitely steeply declined, and a lot of the estimates puts the total African lion population in at about maybe 20,000. So at the last major counts, maybe a few decades ago, it was something like 200,000 lions. So it is a concern. Lions are animals that also represent something, and in different ways for different people. For pure conservationists that are science-oriented, the presence of a lion in a park shows that the park's ecosystem is kind of at the right point to support large predators. And so once you end up in a context where you no longer have lions, it's actually symptomatic of a bigger problem about that park as well. Now, because there's this misconception about there must be hundreds of thousands of lions left, the demand for lion products, particularly bone, teeth, and claws, for the traditional Chinese, the TCM market, as we call it, has grown. Now, just like the Asian rhino populations and species, the three species have crashed due to pretty much over-exploitation. And similarly, our rhinos, I mean, that's a hot topic. But when you think about traditional Chinese medicine, tiger bone was the thing for a long time. Now, tigers have also, they think there's about 2,000 of them left in the wild. So their population has crashed. And just like the rhino example, where did the Asiatic markets turn to? They turned to Africa, because the next proxy or the next example of a powerful cat that they could then turn into a commodity like tiger bone and tiger teeth and tiger claws and bear paws and all of that stuff is an African lion. So a lot of the poaching is about teeth, claws, and bone. Some of the other parts, I mean, you've got to be a bit mad to eat like lion liver and those kind of things. It's very dangerous. It's but that's part of the challenge. And that market, because there's not enough tigers to supply the tiger bone wine market in those let's call them consumer countries, they've been able to turn to lion as a proxy, as a new replacement. And of course, you can, if you're a smart, I mean, it's still criminal, but if you're a smart trader, you can use marketing to say, hey, lion is just as strong and just as potent and just as culturally.
Which they've done.
Yes. And that's what's happened. Is that maneuver, that sidestep to lion has taken place. Just like the sidestep of Asiatic rhinos to African rhinos has taken place more solidly. And I know I'm generalizing a bit. I mean, there has always been a bit of utilization of rhino for all sorts of reasons, and not just in Asia. The Yemenis used to also try and source rhino horn for dagger handles and that kind of thing. That market's kind of collapsed because there's a big civil war in Yemen and everything. So that's that level of income is not there. But if we get back to the issues with lions, it's interesting when you look at the recent history. And when I say recent history, from the mid-2000s to now, the absolute pressure on lions overall has been incredible. And for many of us, like myself, who see lions regularly, you tend to forget, because where we are, lions are fairly secure, although across the border in Limpopo National Park in Mozambique, they've had a bit of human-wildlife conflict with lions, and they've had targeted poaching right on the border. So they've been baiting lions and poisoning them, which is quite, obviously, that's quite hectic, to poison an animal and they die very painfully. It raises a whole, in the case of this discussion as well, for you, Ruth, and the viewers, just thinking about what happens to a lion when it's poisoned. Such an incredible animal who dies not too far from the carcass that's been laced with arsenic or some other really hectic poison. So, sorry, you want to ask a question?
No, not at all. No, I'm just so shocked that they, I suppose, almost cowardice, not like the good old, Cecil John Rhodes with his hunting rifle. I know it sounds a bit, but that they just, go the easy way and actually end up really harming the animal. And what do they end up taking?
So generally, where they can, they don't generally take the whole carcass of the lion. They generally chop off the paws, maybe the head, and maybe cut out some organs. I mean, that's not so common, but definitely the teeth. So taking the head, getting a lion tooth out is not easy out of a lion's skull. So they would often sounds terrible, bag them and tag them. Literally put the lion's head in a sack with the paws, and maybe some other body parts, testes, if it's a male lion, and everything, and then move on. And yeah, so that's kind of been a central growing theme around poaching of lions. As the poisoning is becoming more common, there's also been some lion poaching incidents within South Africa, which has been widely reported on in mainstream media as well. And that's more about taking whole skeletons. So they really are trying very hard to secure that tiger bone / lion bone wine market. And obviously, they do use the bones for other things, like carvings and little sculptures and trinkets and that kind of thing. So it is quite a tough one. And if we look at pure numbers, so in South Africa, in the Kruger, there's approximately 2,000 lions. They struggle to get an absolutely accurate census. So in my area, we're probably a little bit, in terms of Kruger, we're probably a little bit over, because a lot of the private reserves have opened up their fences, which means their lion populations, their wild lion populations have kind of integrated into the Kruger ones. So out of interest for the viewers, where I'm based, which is in the central Kruger, we're the hotspot for the white lion gene, which is found around Timbavati, Thorny Bush, and in parts of the Kruger. So you get these very pale lions, which is incredible. You think it would really make their lives difficult in terms of how they hunt and subsist and sustain themselves. But no, so the pride that we have here, that we hear and see regularly, is a pride with that specific gene, that mutation. So, I mean, there's, when you think about things like that, you think, what are we losing? These it's not just the lion, it's the lion with all its possibilities for human enjoyment. Sounds terrible. Like, we really got to say it, human enjoyment, looking at lions, seeing them in the wild, the mystery of what they bring, reminding us of, just how small the world can be for human beings. When you're in that kind of environment, you realize just how helpless you are, particularly if you don't have a firearm or you're not on a vehicle. It's kind of a great equalizer for us. It's like a really great equalizer. And they represent a portion of balance in an ecosystem. And we are still like, we're not stuck where Europe is right now, trying to rewild. Some places in Europe, they're reintroducing bears, and they're reintroducing European lynx into, I think, parts of the UK now. There's a potential move. Wolves, there's a lot of debate around wolves coming back into Europe, and that kind of thing. Now, we're lucky. We didn't destroy our natural capital in Africa as much as Europe has. But things have changed. We can't, the 1990s, where things were kind of relatively good in conservation, have shifted for Africa. We know that lions, like rhino, represent an example of inappropriate human behavior. And when I say that, I mean, I'm saying something quite contentious, but all cultures, human cultures, are not static. Our cultures evolve over time. And for some of us, like myself, we almost want to say, hey, if some of us can make cultural and lifestyle changes, because cultures adapt over time, why can't the traditional medicine markets of Southeast Asia and mainland Asia adapt as well? And I mean, there's various reasons that maybe they're struggling. And I think maybe part of it is one, the maturity of that market. And when I say the maturity, the amount of money. So China, from the 70s and 80s started to liberalize their market, but obviously not their political system. And they started benefiting economically and financially.
Yeah.
And what they did was they did lift out a lot of people out of poverty into the middle class. So if we talk from a class-based society, suddenly people had more money, they had their traditional cultural values, which is their rights. I understand that, which is their rights. But suddenly when you've got a lot of money with people with those kind of values still operating with those values, their demands could be much bigger. So the pressure on the tiger, and where the tiger's gone, is a warning sign for the lion. Because
Correct.
tigers' populations crash because of overexploitation. And what have some of the Chinese and the Vietnamese, and yes, I know I'm saying names, but this is public knowledge. The seizures of illegal products, wildlife products into those countries is well acknowledged. I mean, they are trying to, both those countries are attempting to mass breed tigers in captive conditions to make up some of the deficit as well, and which brings other issues. So cats in captivity doesn't work. All you eventually do is you mess up the gene pool. And big cats are not easy to rewild. They're far more challenging than a lot of other animals. And with territorial animals, particularly like male tigers and African lions, it will cost you a small fortune. And then you're not guaranteed. If you take a captive bred lion and try and return them to the wild, they're likely going to get killed by other lions, wild lions. They'll be seen as a territorial interloper. And if they haven't had, from being a cub, from play fighting right through to being educated by their mother lionesses, and eventually also learning, getting a few slaps and whacks from their father male lions, they don't have that behavior. And then end up running them into trouble. So there's been lots of attempts at it. It's better, when people ask me the hard question and they say, well, what about captive bred lions? I said, I could never choose a captive bred lion survival over a wild lion survival.
Right, because that's a sorry, an airplane's going over, but I said that's exactly a question in the comments. Is it legal to breed lions in captivity? Not for hunting purposes, of course. Just before we touch on that, I know you've sent me a diagram and we'll get to it just now, but what would, say, a wild lion, a head, claws, testicles, sort of down the line, what would it probably be worth in China or in that part of in the Asiatic region? And what would a local community person gain from setting a trap? Sort of the what do you call it? The levels, the ladder.
So unfortunately, if you're not a kingpin, like in Asian terms, and if you're just the guy that's poaching or poisoning a lion, you'll receive a couple of thousand rand for doing that work. Now, one has to see that in context, though. A couple of thousand rand for somebody maybe doesn't earn more than 200 or 300 rand a month, or is part of a family that is a subsistence family, that's big money. So if they returned with all of those parts, their little bit won't be a huge amount. And we know, so it's just similarly with rhino horn, when the guys get paid anything from 5 to 15,000 rand to poach, as it goes up the value chain, as it moves to the transporter and the syndicate, he gets his slice of the pie. Then it gets to a supervisor, and we have different levels. There's a level 1 guy, and it basically ends at level 7 or 8, which is the end consumer. And as you move up, the people earn more and more money. The consumer, I mean, this is where I almost want to chuckle with some of the end consumers. And in terms of lions, a lot of the when they turn it into a powder or they process it, that actually is a minuscule amount. They're actually getting ripped off for buying that wine. There's hardly anything in it. So they are paying maybe, if they in South Africa, boxed wine is obviously a thing. So tiger bone wine and lion bone wine are sold in the same wine boxes. You literally have a twist cap and you can flip a glass and buy a glass to taste it in the shop that's selling it. They'll allow you to taste, and then if you're happy, then you can buy the wine box. That's how processed it's become as well. So it varies from as little as $50 to $100 up to $1,000 more US to buy the lion bone wine. Not so sure about tiger prices right now, but that's kind of the price range. It varies from rural areas to urban areas as well. So the rural areas actually still remain fairly cheap. Urban areas is much more competitive, and because the entire districts in some of those cities in China and Vietnam that are all about wildlife. So just sidestepping, when people were hearing about wet markets and COVID and COVID originate, and again, I don't want to sound like I'm being xenophobic about the Asians. I'm not. But again, we know COVID originated in China. So we know that culturally they like wet markets and dry markets. They often have a lot of wildlife all compressed together. They also have the stores. That's what a lot of people don't realize, the shops where polished lion claw necklaces are available, and those go for a huge amount. Friends of mine did some investigation over there. It's not super new prices, but it's definitely between $15,000 to $40,000. It's big money. It's a status symbol. That's the other thing. So if you add consumerism and culture together, you often get a very bad mix. And a lot of people say, "Oh, why bother? Why care?" People buy all sorts of things. You might as well say, "Stop eating red meat." And I always say to people, "Hang on. The difference is we have millions of cows on this planet. So if you eat beef, there's a ready supply. We don't have a lot of lions and we don't have a lot of rhino. It's not something that's going to be renewed easily like that. Those populations will take time to recover, which is why the urgency, why like this discussion and similar discussions are so important for people to hear, to say, guys, there's a huge difference between being a middle-class, fairly wealthy, comfortable Chinese person going to the Gucci store and buying a Gucci bag, which is still mass manufactured, yes, at a high quality, and the same person going to spend a similar amount of money for a wildlife product. It's not apples and apples, and those comparisons don't serve the discussion very well. Before I carry on, should I answer Nick's question?
Please. And let me put it up for you again. Is it legal?
Yes. So in South Africa, breeding lions in captivity is legal. It's become more stringent, though. The Department of Forestry are getting quite tight and focused about how you do it. And of course, for some of us, like myself, who don't believe in predator breeding in captive conditions, so there's my opinion straight out.
Straight up. Good.
Yeah. So there's my opinion straight out. It serves almost no purpose other than becoming like an attraction, a tourist attraction. You can attract people in who want to cuddle baby lions and cubs and play with tame sub-adults and things like that. Yeah, you know, it really serves no purpose. Messes up the gene pool, genetics, and we know the other end of it. If wild lion populations are under pressure, and their numbers are being reduced, and then you've got this captive lion population on the other side, you can't just take that and put it in that, because the captive lion population is generally overbred, just like dog breeders that overbreed some of their breeding lions of specific breeds of dogs. And unfortunately, that's how you've got to view it. You have to view it's a terrible thing, because you're almost being forced to make a choice. And for me, the choice is wild lions. Protect the genetic integrity, and actually, let's be optimistic. Start growing the wild lion populations naturally again. Move them to areas where maybe they were forced into extinction. Move them to areas where you can invest in securing conservation and everything as well. So yeah, it's a very, very difficult thing in South Africa, because there are lots of places. I mean, Gauteng, I'm not going to say there's 2 places that are very popular for weekend visitors, where people can go and see lions in a pen environment.
In a petting zoo. Yeah, in a petting zoo. In a petting zoo. Yeah,
so,
not cool. I see we've got our local South African prankster with us this evening. He's just wishing me a happy Pesach. So thanks, Corona's boring. Do the alien thing. Yeah, he always puts a spanner in the works, so to speak. Gives us a bit of a chuckle, which might be a bit of an icebreaker. And Nick would say he hates seeing lions in zoos. So yes, obviously, I think you've mentioned there is a place for zoos when it comes to obviously research and rehabilitation. But I think it's hit the archaic line, the border. I think what it was 100, 200 years ago is that ship has now sailed, you know.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of zoo kind of thinking was driven by like what I call the collection syndrome. In the 19th century, in the 18th century, the whole thing could get really, really not interesting, but they would pay wealthy people in the UK and France and Germany and Europe and America would pay for people to go out and go and capture live animals and return them to places where they were in a collection. And these collections turned into zoos, obviously, over time. And yeah, I mean, it's that purpose of keeping for your own interest is long gone. Now it has to be about conservation. So if facilities are not rehabilitating, so obviously there's a place when, I'll use an example, when a rhino mother who's got a calf is poached, but the calf is not poached and survives the event, that rhino is often captured humanely, by wildlife vets, it's obviously still traumatic and ends up at a rhino orphanage where it can then be slowly rehabilitated, both psychologically. I know some people can go, what are you talking about? Animals have psychology, just like we do. So if zoos are not doing that kind of work, and you can see what's happened, particularly in America, they've tried to reform their zoo system a lot. San Diego, which is a globally famous zoo, is completely had to reconfigure their zoo. They've tried to make it bigger, more space for the animals. They've actually reduced some of their collections because it's not compatible with the animals' well-being. Yes, I think when we spoke previously, yes, the zoos might be places where people will that's the only place I'll ever see a live animal of a certain species. And I suppose you can argue in that favor, but your zoo cannot only serve that purpose. You have to be doing genetic work, you've got to be doing research work, you've got to be adding back to the species, or at least to some of the species in the zoos. And, we know growing up, I mean, I haven't been to a zoo since the 90s, late 90s, I'm showing my age a bit here. But one thing that was very clear is that they would use charismatic species. Lions are charismatic, except most of the time at the zoo, they're either pacing around in a circle, and you can just see the stress emanating off of them, or they're sleeping, and life's just boring. So, you've got to consider that there is an animal welfare component to this conversation, and that's why go into captive breeding lions in the first place? And I'm going to say it, lots of the breeding facilities in South Africa, it's about making money. It's not, they're not in it for the species, because if they were, they wouldn't overbreed them. There's been, so many issues around captive breeding. It even caused a split in the hunting fraternity. Some hunters are saying we're not interested in trying to hunt these weird overbred lions that have been bred in a way that they start showing weird things. So there's even been attempts to get melanistic lions. Like, everybody knows a panther is not actually a species of cat. A panther is a black leopard. And you can see, if you see it in the sunlight, you can see the rosettes of the leopard. And there are also panther jaguars that are black jaguars in the South American jungle, and that kind of thing. So you're almost going, what's the purpose, guys? You're creating a tourist attraction using a charismatic species, and you are making money out of it. Now, in the media in South Africa, there's been a number of reports about the poor conditions. So the Bloemfontein Zoo, the animal conditions there, a couple of the lion breeding facilities that have been bust by the SPCA or the NSPCA have shown just how some lions, and it's terrible because most of them had to be euthanized as well, just in terrible conditions, left there without food, left without water, and end up deteriorating incredibly badly. So getting back to the point, the wild lion population is under pressure. Some of these captive breeding facilities have also been hit by poaching syndicates, because they know exactly that inside that breeding facility and that tourist attraction in Northwest or Limpopo or Gauteng, they know exactly where, they know there's lions, and they know it's actually quite easy to get to them. The methods, obviously poisoning, shooting, and then, essentially chopping off the paws and chopping off their heads and that kind of thing. This is brutal stuff. And that also obviously serves a purpose in the back to the traditional Asian or traditional Chinese medicine market. So that demand is very much there. It's still massive. And without, it sounds terrible, with the tiger population where it's at, now you've got lions that can fill the gap as well. So lion teeth. You mentioned earlier, like the cowardice thing. Remember some of that, the great white hunter kind of stuff that happened in the past. The guys would wear a lion tooth or claw or something like that. The big macho alpha male hunters as their kind of rite of passage as well. That's an interesting thing. Corona's boring. Doing the alien thing, that comment he's made has been quite topical, actually, about trying to bring back woolly mammoths using elephants as surrogate mothers. It hasn't moved too far, but yeah, that's surprisingly has got people's attention, and also other species as well, to see what surrogacy can be used for certain species that are really in trouble. I'm just going to have a quick sip of tea. Yeah, so are you still there, Ruth?
we're back. We're back. Sorry, well, we're back. Shame, Ashwell's eating his dinner still. Forgive me. TG, you added him too soon there. But let me remove you there so you can finish having another bite. So I just want to read some of the comments. Arbot saying millions. Oh, yes. Corona said that's what happens when someone says my name. Yeah, you see, you can't say it out loud.
Okay.
And then we were talking about the mammoth. Obviously, we mentioned, okay, wait, let's just go back. All right. So basically, using other, things that we have at our disposal, genetics, prehistoric, could that actually work? Could we bring back a species like the woolly mammoth?
It's a good one because I think people are keen to attempt it. The only problem is there are reasons why the woolly mammoth went extinct as well. So there's a lot of different views. I mean, I'm not a paleontologist, but there's a lot of different views around why they might not have adapted well to human presence in kind of being hunted in the original region where they were located, which was really like in what they call the boreal part of the northern hemisphere. And they were found North America, Canada, Alaska, and all of that stuff right around. Climate change is another factor. With the ice ages changing, there's a reason why it's called the woolly mammoth. It's woolly. So that could have had an effect. And then with climate change would have mean changes to vegetation and diet. So I don't know. My concern with that kind of thing, of bringing back a species, is maybe they will become just another one of these fads to have a kind of like a woolly mammoth return. Maybe it'll end up being another zoo animal because there's no place that it could possibly survive. I don't know. Again, it's not really my area of expertise, but there is interest. It's more about the techniques. So using surrogate mothers. When the northern white rhino subspecies started going extinct, they were thinking about utilizing southern white rhino cows, using in vitro techniques to carry fertilized ova to term.
Yeah.
To kind of keep that subspecies going. And then I think it's still a topic of discussion. But in terms of lions, once you overbreed a lion, it's problematic. It sounds terrible, but it becomes problematic. You can't do anything with them. They get all sorts of funny conditions as well. So difficult. I'd rather say, yeah.
No, sorry, just like you were going to say, focus on the wildlife. And I know you mentioned there's also the Wildlife World Bank project that's just been launched. I don't know if you want to talk about that. And also, I'm just remembering that you said that the demand for the Asian markets is something like 250, what was it, 250 tons per annum that you'd need to saturate that market, right? For offline.
No, that was for rhino horn. Yeah.
Oh, was that rhino horn? Okay.
Yeah. So,
but it's it's unimaginable, it's unfathomable, the numbers, and it's just, and what I was saying earlier, I don't know if the comments where the screen was or if we were live or not, but actually at the end of the day, the Asian population is actually being screwed if they think they're actually getting value for their buck.
No, I mean it's a huge market. It's what happens when you turn something like wildlife into a pure commodity with almost no other value. We know so many of our, for example, pharmaceutical things. We know, I saw there was a comment about weed earlier.
Yes,
So
yes.
we know the cannabinoid oils and those kind of things have health benefits. That science is kind of coming through. So every time we knock off a species, we might lose something of direct health value to humans. Now, obviously, lions, that's a bit different, but allowing plants to go extinct, or being overly exploited, looking at the scenario as lions, what also people tend to forget is, if you lose all your lions in a big national park, and that national park has been functional with lions for a long period of time, it changes everything else.
Correct.
It changes the prey balance. Suddenly there's less predation. So now you've got to address the prey species as well. You can't allow them to get out of control, which means then more human management. Then you've got to intervene more, because you don't have lions and maybe other large predators in place. So that's a big thing with this whole issue. And that's why getting to that rhino bond that's been secured by the World Bank for the black rhino population in the Eastern Cape, and the Great Fish River Reserve and Addo National Park. The bond has been put in place because their population of rhino is actually growing. So it's not all bad news. It's one of the areas where black rhinos are in the increase, and they've tied the performance of that bond as an investment to the growth. So the bond will grow and the returns will grow and pay for conservation as the rhino population grows. So it kind of reinforces success. And that's, for me, really important, because we're in the era where there's so many different financial instruments, let's call them, tools. It's not just about pure trade. And that's why sometimes the battles that we have in South Africa between different groupings and different lobbyists and lobby groups sometimes becomes a bit self-defeating. You almost want to say, well, other than trade, how else can we financially support conservation to protect lions, rhino, and etc., whatever vulnerable species, and try and secure them? Now, if you can pull off a World Bank bond investment, and the bank that actually led it is Credit Suisse. So, I mean, if you've got behind the World Bank, you've got one of the world's largest privately driven banks invested, seeing the value, then it's possible to mainstream investment into conservation by others. And I think that's a really positive opportunity. If we can get commercial entities more interested in supporting conservation as a financial investment opportunity, that might take the edge off this pressure around trade, because that's the big debate. Right now, when it gets to rhino horn, it's the no trade versus trade people. Then there are types like me that are saying, whoa, that's not the only option. We need to explore, but at the same time, we need to secure
what we
have, and make sure it doesn't decline any further. And so that's a really evocative thing for us to get to grips with, because there's a lot of complexity in conservation. Just like right now, a lot of big issues in the world are very complex. But if we can tackle one or two of the components, and that's kind of what, for the viewers and people say, hey, don't get overwhelmed by the bigness of it all. You can choose one bit and try and help support or get involved or add value or spread the message or do your bit, because you don't have to try and do everything. And I think that's what also freaks people out a bit, about climate change, because it's this big existential threat to the whole planet, and then you freeze. You're like, oh, that's too much to deal with, too big to deal with. And for us, I think conservation looks complex, But once you get to understand where you can make a difference, you can choose to get involved in different things and in different points and stuff like that. So that's like a form of encouragement to the viewers. Please, like if you are keen to get involved, just do your homework. You don't have to try. Don't get freaked out, about this bigness of it all as well. So, like kind of drawing back, swinging back to the lion issue. Yeah, you've got a real problem with the lion population globally. There's lions in Africa, and then there's one small population of lions in India, in the Gir Forest National Park in the far west, borders near Pakistan. It's the last place where you find Asiatic lions.
Sure.
And it's not a well-known fact. It doesn't feature strongly and everything. So we are kind of running out of time. Like we've dropped from 200,000, we're down to possibly the 20,000. And in South Africa, we get used to seeing it. But in the rest, West Africa, as we're speaking now, the Lion Recovery Fund is trying to do more to support lion numbers growing in West Africa. But they've been in a steep decline. And if they don't get dealt with, in the end, there won't be any lions in West Africa. And we're quite close to that extinction. In 2006, there were still a few lions in Somalia, believe it or not. Sounds crazy. No more. And whilst we're talking about actually the Horn of Africa for everybody's interest, the Horn of Africa is a major transit route for live cheetah smuggling to the Middle East. Not so much the Far East, but for the pet trade, getting cheetah cubs out into the Middle East. So cats overall are generally the big cats are generally under lots of pressure, particularly lion, leopard. South Africa's having challenges with leopard as well. Other countries, leopard are amazing animals. They adapt well, but they're also not easy to always figure out what their populations are. And similarly with cheetah, they also drop down to incredibly low numbers as well. So it's quite for the big cats, without sounding pessimistic, they need a lot more work. And we do need to disrupt this whole illegal wildlife trade and some of these inappropriate social cultural behaviors. And I've used that example before. If the British could stop fox hunting for their elites and their wannabe elites in their society, and then, sure, there's not nearly as many British people as there are people in China, but we've got to do something about it.
No, I think they need an awakening. I think someone's asking, Leowen is asking every time. Okay, wait, that's not the comment. Forgive me. I see it's down here. She was asking, is there a difference? Is there a way of differentiating between natural extinction versus overkilling? I'm sure.
Overkilling or overutilization, you can pick up very quickly in populations. Natural extinction has a whole lot of factors that drive it. So you could have a climate disaster, a natural disaster that could flood out an entire reserve or whatever and kill all the lions. They might drown. In fact, when there were the big floods in this region in about 2011, a whole lot of hippo got washed down into Mozambique from the Kruger. The rivers flooded and they couldn't get out in time. So you can have natural extinction events, and that's very much part of the natural cycle of things. But you can, particularly with wildlife law enforcement and monitoring, conservation monitoring, more on the tech side, camera traps and monitoring animal populations. You can pretty much figure out how those populations are doing over time. So drivers of extinction could be, and that's an interesting question that she's asked, Leon's asked, because the lower your genetic diversity is in a species, the greater at risk it is to extinction, because that species becomes less resilient to disease, becomes less resilient to natural disasters, and it becomes less resilient to competing species. So imagine if the lion population took a major hit, but the spotted hyena population didn't. There's quite a strong chance that the spotted hyenas would start out competing the lions over time. And that's kind of part of the thing. Unfortunately, one of the factors that comes into her question, and it's a great question, is that most of our conservation areas in South Africa, particularly, are fenced areas. And as soon as you put a fence up around something, you have to manage it. You can't just let things go wild in there, because, and when I say wild, you can't just let go of control, because those animals can't naturally move in and out anymore. You've got to start building infrastructure to make sure that they have either water or they don't overgraze. And, one of the big things around culling of elephants in the Kruger since the 90s was stopped was this whole concern around how many elephants is too many, destroying trees and all of that, and destroying the vegetation. So it's a very tricky thing. Once you put a fence around something, you've got to manage it. And also, the smaller an area gets, the more intensively you've got to manage it as well, because you've got less room to maneuver, less resources. And that's why a lot of these, getting back to the captive lion breeding operations, a lot of them are quite small, and like the size of the land that those lions in, they're quite small areas. And you kind of go, no, man, you can't operate like that. You're going to have to spend a bit of money and resources and time continuously having to look after them. Where the bigger the area gets, the less you have to manage them. So, like with the lion population in Kruger, yes, we keep an eye out for poaching of them and everything, but you can pretty much let them do their thing. Let them compete within their own population, in terms of territorial behavior and that kind of stuff. So I hope I answered Ewan's question well.
Yeah. I think Marlies from Namibia, aka the Cheetah Tunny, shares the view of predators breeding in captivity. But I see you've obviously made your opinion known, and I think I get the feeling that, for me anyway, that's the right way to go. I think as soon as humans start interfering, and as we know, like you say, what's happened in Europe, they've taken over. There's no real wildlife resource anymore, and now they're slowly trying to reintroduce it. But yeah, that's, and like she's saying, yes, that was very interesting. So yay. No, thank you, Ashel. This has been, and I could literally go through with you elephant, giraffe, wild dog. I had a graphic, and now with obviously the screen crashing, and I'm not sure if I want to add too much stuff to my computer now, but the lines that we saw obviously looked slightly. Let's just see if we can get it back. Hold on one second. You mentioned that TB is still a very serious occurrence in the Kruger National Park. How did it actually all start? Do we know? Was it due to what's being done about it?
So what's pretty much happened is TB shifted down, if I remember correctly, from East Africa over time, and slowly but surely penetrated the Kruger. And TB is a jumper. it's a jumping disease like COVID, can move between species. So lions were predating on other animals that had TB, and then through wet tissue transfer, bodily fluids, lung tissue, that kind of thing. And think about how, so let's keep this very practical, might sound gruesome. Think about how often a lion kills its prey. They often take it on the upper neck, on the back, or by the throat, if they can get to the front. Otherwise, they swarm it from behind and overwhelm it. When they are gripping a prey animal and essentially strangling it, asphyxiating it, and it falls over, they are rubbing up against that animal's saliva and bodily fluids. And most of their prey are like cows. You know, they chew the cud. They have a high degree of salivation. So there's a lot of movement of that fluid and lung-related stuff. So TB, and it's terrible. I've been involved with autopsies of lions with TB, and you can see the spotting on the lungs. So you open up the whole carcass and of the lion, and you can actually see the spotting on the lungs and just the general condition. So,
oh no, not again. Oh, not again. As soon as it's this graphic, it's got to be. Sorry, people. We seem to have. Why does it keep happening? Don't know. Sorry. Ashwell, you there? Oh, we might have lost him again. Maybe he'll rejoin. It's so interesting. It's just, and things we don't even think about in our daily day, like what could be happening. I mean, I thought TB was part of the 80s, what was going, but everyone, Leoin, thank you for being here. Arbot, if you're still here, how's it? Nick, thank you for hanging in there. Yeah, I don't know what's with the streaming tonight. I think, I think it's all this load shedding. It's affecting our software. We really need to do something about it, like unplug stuff. Make sure you need to switch off before load shedding happens. I don't know what's happening. All of a sudden, my reliable computer has now become not so reliable. Yay. I just hope Ashwell can rejoin us. Yeah, he was getting to a good point. Else we will definitely have him back. I don't know if he's been hit by load shedding. Could be. Let me just see if I can get him back. Maybe he's being hit by it. But it's Ashwell has a lot of knowledge. He's the top in his field. He is remarkable. I definitely want him back to discuss a whole lot of other topics. Arbot says, I saw giraffe, kudu, sable, impala, black impala, water, nyala, and a few buffaloes en route today. Oh, wow. Cool, Arbot. Where did you go? Gert Jansen from Rensburg. Thank you. By the way, guys, if you're new here and you haven't subscribed, please give us a subscribe and a likey. Much appreciated. I try to put out content once a week. But yeah, I try and cover a vast array of topics, from sexual fetishes to anatomy to what's going on in our national parks, like tonight. I think Ashwell's been hit by load shedding. I think I don't know if he can come back. I see he is there, but maybe he's just gone down for a bit. But we could definitely have him back again. Yeah, load shedding. What did you say, Leon? Sorry. Affecting connectivity. Noticed that all day today. No, it's ridiculous. Oh wow, most of Limpopo must have been beautiful. Sure. Yeah, anyone here from KZN? What's happening on that front? I'm not sure. I mean, that's just some of the images still are just shocking. Yeah, and that's what happens. So NGOs worldwide, if you ever hear this, don't give the ANC money. Give them literally gift cards. Yeah, gift of the givers. They help. I really don't know what's happened to Ashwell, but I think we might just end it, and I might invite him back. I will definitely invite him back to continue talking with us. Yeah, he's just, give me a second. You guys holding on for 1 second. I'm just gonna mute my mic and see if I can speak to him quickly, if he'll take a call, if he's able to. Give me 1 second while I try and get it back. Hold on. No, I think he's lights out. He's not even on data anymore. So I think it's definitely lights out. Yeah, just when it was getting interesting, I think look, he's very high up, and he advises. I know he deals with the forestry and what are they called? The government department of industries. So yeah, we will get him back again, and maybe I'll give you guys a little bit more of a heads up, and we can plan a few more questions. But yeah, this is all part of life, guys. Nothing, don't plan for anything, prepare for all. But yes, all right, I'm gonna end it. Now it's yeah, everything's down. All right. So thank you very much, people, and let me just see. He's just sent me something. So yeah, we'll have to redo this another evening, but hopefully maybe in the first week of May. And yeah, we'll have the fire going, and we can talk wildlife. So yeah, thanks for joining me, everybody. Have a lacquer week, and hang on to your bootstraps with the load shedding. And yeah, hopefully, yeah, we've got to get off grid, and we've got to stop enabling the cancer that is the ANC. Anyway, cheers, people. Take care. Bye.